Hi! Today we'll be reading incredible malicious compliance stories. Our first post is titled, Completely Delete a Client's Company's Website and Email Services? Are you sure? Okay. This happened a few years ago, so details are a bit fuzzy and chat is paraphrased. I was tier 2 tech support for a company that handles my country's largest internet service provider's entire professional email services, all its DNS management services, and a large portion of its website building and web hosting services. This company is tiny, minute, not even a blip in the radar, but has power that I will likely never again hold at my fingertips. One day, a ticket comes in from the internet service provider. Big client company is moving away from our proprietary email services and into Microsoft 365 or some such equivalent exchange. This usually meant I got to help the client through the processes of changing DNS records, migrating inboxes, or just backing up emails and even eventually setting up some stuff on the Microsoft side. Technically not my job, but the ISP's tier 1 tech support was woefully untrained for anything even remotely technical and terribly unprepared for most things merely commercial. And my company was awesome and treated me right. So, ticket. ISP. Client is moving from service X to service Y. Please remove their subscription from the database. Me. There seems to be some sort of a mistake, which is very common. We remove them from there once the new service is set up and running. Otherwise, it will delete everything in their subscribed package, including all email storage, DNS records, and website. You likely want to change their subscription to not include email services, but keep the rest, since your Microsoft subscription doesn't include DNS and web hosting management. And even that change only after they have their new email service set up. ISP. Yada yada, confirm. Remove their subscription. Me. Are you absolutely sure? This process is not recoverable. All their emails, DNS records, and entire website, including database, will be permanently deleted. ISP. Request has been submitted. Remove subscription. At this point, it's been a couple of days since the first ticket, so I call my boss. Absolutely wonderful guy and extremely intelligent, and tell him what they're asking me to do. Boss. Alright, let's show them that they pay us because we know things and they don't. Don't delete the subscription, but suspend all services that would be affected. Keep those tickets at hand and expect a phone call. If they call you, tell them to talk to me. I honestly thought OP would delete everything as per protocol, but this is really smart thinking on the boss's part. God, that felt good. I mean, I felt bad for the client because their entire company basically shut down for an afternoon. But when they called my work phone directly from ISP, which is uncommon, usually just for emergencies, and the nice lady asked me what had happened, with client in that tone that says, I'm doing my best to hear all sides before making a decision, but I'm freaking the hell out right now. And I directed her to the ticket where I very clearly stated what would happen if I did what they told me to, and then told her to call boss. I felt so vindicated. Boss later told me to let them sweat for a couple of hours because the process should have been unrecoverable, and then turn the services back on. ISP was, yet again, absolutely thrilled with us, and my name kept coming up even more often as the person that solves things. Our next story is called Boss Told Me to Organize My Tools. I've been a mechanic for nearly 15 years. I'm the lead tech in my shop, and my company just sold recently to a different corporation, and with that came a new boss. A little bit of a history about the new boss. He's 22 and the son of one of my older bosses, so everybody suspects a bit of nepotism at play. The older boss was ruthless and a jerk, and really put a dent in my confidence about being a mechanic, so I may hold somewhat of a grudge against the family, but I try to do my best to move on and just do my job. The new boss and I have had some minor issues already in the 3 months he's been there, but I'm the type of person who can generally put my feelings to the side if the money keeps ending up in my paycheck. Today, however, that changed. I will admit, I'm not the most organized person. I have ADHD and at 33 years old, still learning to function without my medicine that I weaned off at 26. My toolbox is normally cluttered, but I keep all my tools in my area or on top of my box. It's the system that works for me. This morning, I clocked in and was about to unlock my box when the new boss came up to me and said, "You will not be working on the cars today until your box is organized." I said, "My box is organized in the way it works for me." He shot back with, "Not good enough for me or the company. I need to be able to find tools when I need them, and it needs to look neat and orderly for when corporate comes through." I paused for a second and said, "So you're telling me that you need to be able to find my tools that I have purchased when you need to use them?" I don't remember signing that agreement. He nodded and muttered something about insubordination and that he would be passing off all the work to the other technician until it was completed to his satisfaction. The amount of the audacity this boss has to think he has any say about someone else's property. It would be one thing if they were all over the place, but they're not. Okay, well, let's continue reading to see how OP employ malicious compliance. I assumed he was bluffing until 3 cars came in and all 3 tickets were handed to the other tech. I don't have any problem being told to clean up, and I would have done it his way, but I had a problem with his tone, and this was messing with my paycheck. So while he was in the back doing tire inventory, I opened the top drawer from my toolbox, spread my arms, and swept every single thing into the drawer that I could. I repeated for the second and the third drawer until the top was clean. I used the same process for both of my smaller carts until each one could be closed and locked. Then I clocked out for lunch. I'm currently sitting in my car in the parking lot, eating lunch and browsing job listings while watching him try to open all my drawers to use my tools because 3 more cars came in and the other tech can't handle 6 at a time. Too long, didn't read. My boss withheld work to make me organize my tools his way, so now I'm withholding my tools completely. Update. I did not expect this to blow up like this. I clocked back in from lunch and boss asked to speak with me. Apparently, he called the district manager and also his dad, who is a district manager of another district, for advice, and it sounds like they both told him to make it right and that he could not afford to lose me. I know how it sounds, but it's true. He told me that he just wanted to make a good impression on corporate, who would be coming through in a few weeks, and that he shouldn't have targeted me personally. He paid me for the 3 vehicles he worked on, and I let him know that I was willing to work with him, but if he ever spoke down to me again, there would not be a do-over. I would leave. He also inquired about buying his own tools. He's not a bad dude, just a little anxious, I guess. I suppose I'll stick around for a little, as the paychecks are worth it and the drive is convenient and I have a wife and a house to pay for. As for some of the responses, yes, I am somewhat of a slob with my toolbox, but I'm also average 10 to 15 cars a day, so I don't always have time or the drive to neatly organize my tools daily. He said he'll be bringing his toolbox from home and calling or texting to ask to borrow before borrowing. I guess I'm somewhat of a rare mechanic, as I don't mind people borrowing my tools as long as they are put back. Also, the empty toolbox comments. I own all 4 toolboxes, so they would be coming with me if I left. Thanks for the support, guys. Seems like maliciously complying paid off for once. Let's hope your boss learned his lesson and won't be giving you any more trouble. Next post is called "Who is really watching the clock?" Backstory: I used to work in hotels years ago. The hotel I worked at has a policy where there must be at least 1 staff member at the hotel 24/7. I worked at an unenviable but fireproof position of part-time front desk and relief night audit, so I never knew when I was going to be working. 16-hour shifts weren't common, but expected of me when the main night audit called in sick. The story: I had a middle manager who got bored and liked to ruffle feathers for entertainment. Annoying, but I only had to deal with it for 2 to 3 days a week because no one else wants to cover the night audit. They also loved to sleep in and would routinely call in late in the mornings. I really couldn't stand them, but they were my boss, so after giving the essential information and passed the torch from the night audit to the morning manager and crew, I clocked out promptly and got out of the line of fire, or so I thought. I get a call waking me up at 11 a.m. because I was sleeping off my graveyard shift that night. I was told to report to the hotel for a disciplinary meeting that includes middle manager and the general manager of the hotel, my boss's boss. I asked them what the meeting was about, and they replied that it was due to my excessive use of overtime. I then asked them if I could come in before my shift that night so that I could actually get some sleep for my next graveyard shift. They replied that I would have to arrive within the hour. Took me 30 minutes to drive to get there, or they would tack on insubordination or some other nonsense to my file as well. I needed a job for rent, so I complied and got to the hotel half asleep. I'm glad nothing happened to OP, because driving when you're tired is really dangerous, since the likelihood of accidents is much higher, even accidents including death. And no job in the world is worth death. As I'm driving, I'm trying to figure out how to explain away the nice overtime additions on my paycheck. Took me a solid 10 minutes, but I remembered that the middle manager had yet to actually show up on time for the past month. That wakes me up more, and I show up to the meeting absolutely cheerful and smiling, much to the displeasure of the general manager and my boss. Boss goes on a tirade about how abusing company time is horrible in many different ways. I no longer have my eat shit in green, but I'm still unfazed by the dressing down and letting them blow off their steam that was likely put on them by payroll or HR about how my paychecks were getting too fat for their liking. This is confirmed by a shorter but more professional dressing down by my general manager about me costing the company excess money and that I should know better because I run the hotel books. I calmly state that all the overtime statements were true and that I would like to compare my punching times to the staffing schedule and the start and the end times of the people I was relieving in the evening and who was relieving me in the morning. I explained to them that I was only staying on until the next crew relieved me and I had sufficient time to brief in the incoming crew, per the corporate policy of the hotel must be maintained 24/7. They do and see that there is only a 3 to 5 minutes overlap between my shift and the person relieving me. General manager looked pissed, and middle manager went from smug to looking like they got their hand caught in the cookie jar, as their clockings showed usually 7ish and sometimes even 7:30, when their start time was 6. I was told by the general manager that they would reimburse me for the minutes to drive me to and from the hotel, as well as the duration of the meeting, and that the write-up was being dropped in the light of the new information. Fallout. Middle manager still made my life miserable until I left, but at least they never gave me grief about overtime after that and actually started showing up to work at 6 a.m. and not snooze until 7. My paychecks were less, but at least I got more sleep because I was now better able to beat the morning commute at the end of my shift. It kinda sucks how OP still got indirectly punished for this, money-wise. Edit. I knew my paychecks were coming in hefty for my wage. I never made a stink about staying late because hotels pay maybe 5 cents more than minimum wage if you work graveyard shifts. I kept my mouth shut about my paycheck. I needed that extra cash and dealt with the sleep deprivation for the almost guaranteed additional hour of overtime at the expense of a lazy and petty boss. I had my moment of, how do I save myself? On the way to work and was conveniently able to throw my rubble-rousing manager under the bus in one go. And someone commented exactly what I was talking about before. As a former graveyard worker, 7 to 11, it really grinds my gear when the employers expect you to attend mandatory meetings/training in the middle of sleepy time. They know your hours. Expecting employees that are coming off an all-nighter to be at work 4 hours after you've gone home is bonkers. Night shift working already screws with your sleep. I've known people that left to go home and never made it because they fell asleep while driving. Sleepy driving is equivalent to drunk driving. Last story is called HR and Payroll Manager Asked to Automate Their Decisions Away. In my first job, I worked in IT as an access and permission administrator at a large company with significant technological debt. The environment included custom software dating back to the Windows 9X and even DOS era. Initially, the work was quite tedious, involving a lot of back and forth communication between multiple departments. We had to ensure that each employee had the necessary training and documentation to access data in the scope requested by their manager. Additionally, we needed approval for the manager of the department related to the system role in question. On top of that, the company's excessive paper-only bureaucratic workflow made the work go at a snail's pace. A single SAP account for a blue-collar worker required at least 3 forms signed by different people. The heads of the departments responsible for signing those papers didn't feel any urgency to send them to us quickly. A good example of this is when I, myself, waited over 2 weeks after being hired in the IT department before my first account was set up. Until that, I only had a guest account that allowed me to access the main internal website with the company's procedures, regulations, and other basic information. Up to this point, each signed form had to be physically delivered to us, which was agonizingly slow, given that the company had multiple branches. We decided to automate away the paperwork. Our first step was to allow the use of scanned documents. It was a partial success. While it eliminated the courier delays, management still required us to sign the physical copies afterwards, which we mass stamped at the end of each month. The next step was to introduce a fully electronic workflow. We faced significant resistance from upper management, so we had to settle on a system that mostly replicated the existing paper processes. Despite this, it was a game changer. We created presets that managers could select and customize as needed, using data from these customizations to create better fitting presets. We also developed workflows that automatically generated and assigned sub-tickets for necessary approval and tracked how long it took, sending reminders if needed. And finally, we got an approval from HR to access layoff data to generate user block/removal tickets. Sometime after we rolled out the new system, the HR/payroll manager made a big fuss. She was furious that her team was still waiting weeks to get their permission and questioned whether all our work has been for nothing. That really struck a chord with me. Inside, I was overjoyed, but I did my best to keep a natural expression. At that time, we were working on summary reports with burn down and bottlenecks charts. And I already knew that tickets requesting HR/payroll access were spending over most of their lifespan waiting for her or one of her sub-managers to approve them. Wait, so let me get this straight. The manager was angry because the OP didn't deliver permission fast enough while being the one causing the delay? The manager immediately went on the defensive, claiming she couldn't keep up with the amount of tickets. She then requested a change. She wanted any request from her employee to be automatically approved within the relevant scope of their subdepartment. For example, a request for an HR worker to have full HR access and limited payroll access would be automatically approved for HR access, but not for payroll, and vice versa. Automatically approving requests? What could possibly go wrong? I was skeptical, but wasn't exactly in a position to argue. I asked my boss to join the discussion and explained that the goal was to prevent overly permissive approvals that could lead to unauthorized access. I tried to convince her to brainstorm together potential edge cases before making a blanket approval, but she was already set on her decision and wasn't interested in discussing details. My boss shrugged and said it would be her responsibility. He told me to write up an official document outlining the change, and we would proceed with the implementation. The only request we had was to include a line that each such request would still be created, assigned to as normal, and marked as automatically approved by the manager's decision. I uploaded the scan into our system and, anticipating that it would eventually backfire, made a photocopy to keep it handy in the top drawer of my desk. The original copy went to the archive. A few weeks later, she stormed into our room. The speed with which she flung the door open made it clear she was furious. She demanded to know why we granted full access to payroll data to her subordinate. I think it was the only time I ever heard anyone yell in the company. I calmly reminded her of her request to automatically approve in-department access requests. She wasn't having it, explaining that one of her low-ranking subordinates from the payroll subdepartment had accessed the salaries of everyone in their department, including managers, and was unhappy with the paycheck disparity. Isn't it obvious that they shouldn't be able to do that? Well, yeah, to a human, but that decision was automated away by your request. I handed her a copy of the document she signed, which instructed us to automatically approve any and all such tickets, without exception. Immediately afterwards, she asked us to roll back the change while she wrote up another documentation to cancel the previous one. In the following days, she meticulously reviewed all those tickets and requested us to reduce access for several users. I have to admit, she did a thorough job and kept up a good pace in reviewing new requests, doing it daily instead of once every week or two, as before. In the end, we managed to distill a subset of permissions that could be approved automatically and proceeded to implement a similar approach with other departments. P.S. I didn't know whether that payroll employee managed to get the raise, but I'm sure they weren't fired, as we didn't receive any tickets to block or remove any accounts from the department in the following months. It would be nice if they got the raise, and I'm glad they didn't get fired over this. A commenter added their story. I found a list of salaries of all my boss's direct reports that he left on the copier. I discovered I made significantly less than my co-workers who had similar or reduced responsibilities and had the same tenure. I took it to my boss, told him I saw the disparity, and he needed to address it quickly. He said there was nothing he could do about it, and it was what it was. I updated my resume and started taking days off, going on interviews. When he asked me why I was taking time off, I told him I was looking for a company that valued me and paid me appropriately. He got very pale and left my office. I continued interviewing. A few days later, I received an off-schedule, very large raise. Yay! And that's why, people, you should talk about your pay. If you don't know what's fair pay, you'll have no idea if you're getting underpaid. If you like this video, give it a like and click on the screen to watch another video about malicious compliance. And thank you for watching. With your help, I'll be back in hell in no time.